Oof. Welcome, ladies and gents. Neil Young. Do you know who he is? I'm sure there's lots of people that have utterly no idea who this individual is. But basically, he said to Spotify, if you don't remove Rogan, you remove all of me. And Spotify said, that's a threat? Yeah, sure. Whatever. No skin off my nose, I guess. I think this is like the definition of cutting your nose off to spite your face. You've got a huge platform, Spotify, and then you've got Neil Young coming out and just going, remove all of my stuff. Bearing in mind he's sold 50% of his stuff anyway. So I don't understand how the sort of legal ramifications of that works out. If you didn't know, Neil Young, he's an old rock star. Supposedly, you know, rocking in the free world, did free speech tours, all this kind of stuff, but is now looking to control and, you know, threaten and coerce, because that is what he's trying to do. He's trying to get Spotify to force, and yeah. So anyway, he sold half of his stuff a while back. So it's I don't understand how that worked out either, because the company that bought half of his library, I'm sure they're missing out on some of that money from Spotify now. They're not going to be best pleased. But let's take a look, because this was hilarious. And you know what? It's you know what I like about this is that, you know, this is the argument that everyone makes, is that, you know, vote with your wallets, or, you know, people freedom of speech is not freedom without consequence, right? So Neil Young obviously stood up and, you know, free speech. He wanted to say, yeah, no, remove everything. Even though he did delete it. But whatever. And now here's the consequence. And I bet you anything, he's seething behind closed doors. Because he'd be making money from Spotify. You know, it's a significant amount. It would have been a reasonable amount of money. And now all that's gone. Gone. Revenue stream. Gone. So it'll be interesting to see whether this comes back. But let's take a look, right? And FYI, this is not... I'm not sitting here going, yeah, Joe Rogan. I don't even watch Joe Rogan. I got other things to do with my time than watch Joe Rogan or watch general podcasts. Now, that's not because I don't like him. I don't know. I haven't watched enough of his stuff to like it. It doesn't really interest me personally. So just as an FYI, because I've done a previous video on Joe Rogan, and it seems to be this weirdly divisive chap. But this is not... Covering a story is not an endorsement of the individual. Does that make sense? It's not even an indictment of the individual. I've got to make that clear, apparently, as well. It's baffling how people are so inept these days at deciphering the two. But let's take a look, because this is comical as hell. So, just like a hurricane, Neil Young's music is no longer on Spotify. And it took them 24 hours. Less than 24 hours after the streaming platform said it would comply with the Rock and Roll Hall of Famers' clamorous request to choose between Rogan or Young, not both. That was literally... I can't believe he thought this would work out in his favour. Because that's what... that is... From people that have interacted with Neil Young, he's an incredibly selfish individual. He's very egotistical. He's very self-centred. So it's very clear that he believes he would have got the upper hand here. Right? It's very clear. But no, mate. So anyway, classic Young albums like Harvest, Rust, Never Sleeps and Harvest Moon are gone. And in fact, the only Neil Young songs on Spotify now are the artist performing other people's songs on a Bob Dylan tribute, a sample of the Bright soundtrack with Dram, and the Needle and the Damage Done and Nothing's Perfect from the songwriter at Live Aid in 1985. Additionally, tunes from Young's old bands, Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, are still on the subscription music service for now. And that's probably because he doesn't fully own that, so he can't fully control it. I hazard a guess. So this is the story, right? So in protest against Spotify, Joe Rogan, spread of misinformation over COVID-19 vaccines, polio survivor Young. The fact that he's a polio survivor means absolutely nothing. There's no relevance here. That's a media trick to try and get you to side with him. And again, note the quotation marks, spread of misinformation. They're quoting him, Neil Young, directly, and other individuals, because, Deadline is unable to say that because they know that they could fall under some issues with people. Legal issues at the end of the day. So Young penned an open letter to the Swedish company earlier this week to make a choice between him and the ex-Fear Factor host. Spotify is potentially causing death to those who believe the disinformation being spread up by them, Young bluntly said in the now deleted open letter. Having handed over $100 million to Rogan a couple of years ago for the exclusive rights to the Joe Rogan Experience, Spotify pulled the plug on the godfather of grunge. Why did you think this was going to work in your favour, mate? It was never going to happen, was it? Let's be honest. Of course it was never going to happen. But, let's potentially causing death to those who believe the disinformation. I mean, you could say that about anything. You could say that about, you're potentially causing irreparable death and harm to people that take it, right? There are so many avenues to go down because there's, people talk about science as if it's some very clear-cut thing, and it's not actually. Science does evolve and ever change, and you have to keep an open mind. Scientists are those that ask the question why or how. It's the how, what, or why, the functions of things. Science is not one clear, finite, black and white thing. Science does ever change, and it does. And this will ever change. Those running out now, running their mouths as if this is one finite thing, you want to take a good, long, hard look at how people have been purporting, and pushing what this science has been from the start. So a 2-year period now. You've got 2 years where you can go back and look at what people were reporting on what you must do as very finite things. It was, this is what you must do because this is the science. And you can look and you can trace it. You can trace how it's changed, ladies and gents, because it's not a finite thing. It's not black and white, right? It ever changes. And this will change. So to sit there and say we're spreading, cause and death and stuff, I mean, I don't, that's not something I'm going to believe. I'm just not. Not without admitting, or at the very least, having the same opinion to the contrary, if that makes sense. That people would be potentially causing death for the other situations as well. I've got to be quite careful of what I say, obviously, on YouTube. So anyway, having declined to provide a schedule yesterday on when Young's tunes would be trashed, the music streamer had no comment today on Young's music disappearing. Why would they? They got a threat and they said, fuck it, go away. As for Rogan, he posted a new podcast Thursday. However, despite a more than 2.5-hour convo with UFC women's bantamweight champion Juliana Pena and talking about dancing around topics, the longtime UFC commentator had zero to say about the controversy. And you know why? Because he doesn't care. Right? If you don't address something, it's not on your radar. It doesn't matter. You've had YouTube's king douche Ethan Klein running his mouth for ages about Joe Rogan, and he's not addressed it. Why? Because it's like a fly. It doesn't matter. It's like a fly just buzzing around. No one cares. He's whatever. Who cares? Fuck off. He's not going to comment because he doesn't care. Literally, just does not care. But I find Deadline's response quite funny. He says, or to quote Rogan from his podcast Thursday, what's wrong with my brain today? Good question. Why? What, because he didn't address? Because he chose not to address a washed out rock star wanting his music to be chosen over a podcaster? No, I would say there's nothing wrong with his brain for not addressing that. I would say that there's something wrong with his brain if he did address it. It's not worth his time. Neil Young's a fly in comparison to, what Rogan is valued at for Spotify. It's completely naive to think the opposite. Completely naive. And it's so strange that Deadline chooses that sort of angle to focus on. It's very odd. Good question. Why? So odd. Really, really odd. Really, really odd. And then they pull out Fauci on this as well. He's flip-flopped on again, you know, it's the same with our scientists over here in the UK. They've flip-flopped so much. We were told masks were pointless, literally. No point. Then we're told that you should, and now we're told you don't need them again. Like, it's just, come on. Like, if you are consistently agreeing with what the government is saying at this point in your life, right, if you find yourself always agreeing with what the government is saying, just take a step back and go, why is that? Because there are vested interests elsewhere. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, great big grand conspiracy. You know, that's not the point. But just open your eyes a little bit. I mean, there are vested interests elsewhere. Absolutely there are. Anyway, there you go. There you go, ladies and gents. Neil Young, washed up rock star versus Joe Rogan. The god of Spotify, I guess, at this point in time. It's just hilarious to watch this stuff pan out. I wonder how many people will just self-destruct on this. You know, that's the hill you're willing to die on. No worries, I guess. No worries. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down below. If you're new here, do hit subscribe. And again, this is not political. I don't understand why people think that this is politics. I've not once mentioned any politics here. And secondly, it's not an endorsement of Rogan, nor is it a condemnation. So, apparently I've got to say that these days, because people are idiots. Anyway, cheers. Take care.